Welcome to the December 19th prep session for the C-CDA Implementation-a-thon track that's going to be running in San Antonio as part of the HL7 Fire Connect-a-thon 20. Very excited that you all could make it today. This is not our last session, but it's our last session before the holidays, and then we have a break for a couple of weeks so you guys can get busy and get aggressive about developing your samples and getting materials pulled together for the implementation-a-thon, and then we're back again together on January 9th. We are having a little bit shorter session today due to some login mishaps created by the GoToMeeting, but hopefully we'll still be able to get through everything I was hoping to cover today. And the recording will be available for anybody who does miss today's session. You can catch up when I send out the YouTube link. In preparation for today, last week we talked about a little bit of homework that would involve familiarizing yourself with what US-CDI is. It stands for United States Core Data for Interoperability. And there are two documents that are out on Confluence, I'll show them to you now, where we have in the resources area underneath the 2019-01, 12, and 13 C-CDA Implementation-a-thon page, this resources area has got posted the draft US-CDI PDF. I'll show you that. It was issued by the ONC back in January of this year. And then another presentation, which I'll show you some highlights from as we talk about getting ready for this session at the implementation-a-thon. So you should be able to get to both of these and download them for your own reference. I'm going to show them to you today. This page right here, page 6, is where I'll show you what the top of this looks like. This document that was developed and shared as a draft, and we do expect in the national rulemaking, the proposed rulemaking that will be coming out between now and Christmas time, very shortly, I expect, we are going to see a next round of confirming and clarifying this draft material. But it's sufficient for planning purposes to utilize the information that was drafted in here to prepare us for our conversation. And it's a short document, really easy to read, but I'm taking you to a couple of spots where there's some pictures that I think are very informative about this overall plan. So the first spot that I'll stop in is the area where they talk about this not only as something that is definitional in terms of saying what certain data classes are and what they pertain to, but it's also a process. So you think of US-CDI not as just a sort of a static spec around certain things, but you think of it as a process that is a quality improvement loop or a capacity improvement loop, where a set of data classes begin to be evaluated as having the potential to really have large consensus around how to represent them, how to put them into the standards, etc. And they emerge and kind of come onto the scene so that we're all aware that this is coming. And then as they get solidified and we come to greater agreement and consensus about how to represent them, they are moved to this new yellow category, which is called under consideration. And finally, as enough of the details are ironed out that they're in a position to have large scale adoption, then they become required. And this is a process that we believe will push us through to an expanding set of commonly understood sort of core data supporting interoperability, and will take us through a process that will allow us to move from where we are today to having a much larger volume of information that is consistently represented and truly supports interoperability between systems. The final piece that I'll stop on in this document is a place where the draft US-CDI lays out 22 different data classes. Now, lots of us have issues with the choice of words data class. If you're technical in your background, you know, you think of something very different when you think of that word. But I would say get over it, make it mean whatever you need it to mean, and get comfortable with that in your own mind. Whatever the words may be, perfect or imperfect, the important thing is that there are a variety of data elements and data element types that have been identified for us to focus on in this earliest phase of this process of coming to large-scale consensus and consistent representation in all of these areas.
Hey, Lisa.
Yes.
This is Matt. I just wanted to clarify that there's no specific date that any rulemaking will be coming out, so there's no guarantee that it will happen before Christmas or anything. So just wanted to clarify, because I got a question. That's what I heard.
Okay. Well, maybe I was just being really hopeful that at least Santa Claus would have something in his sleigh there to hang our hats on. But all right, I'll back.
Would you really want it? Would you really want it right before Christmas? I'm just kidding, but well, there's no guarantee when it will come out.
No guarantees. So at some point in time, we are expecting, hopefully, something more to come out on this. But in the meantime, is it safe to say, Matt, that in the meantime, working from this draft is about the best we can do?
Yeah, because that's what we've put out.
That's what we've got. So this is what we can work from. Thank you very much for that clarification. So here in the at least in the draft material, we got started with understanding some of these areas to target initially. And if you want to read the rest of the document, it's only 13 pages. You know, it takes you through on understanding at a deeper level, and it's available. You can also find it on the internet, but you can just download it from the Confluence site. But the next thing that I want to show you is work that happened and was discussed at the Interoperability Forum last August. And a large group of implementers came together to look at the proposed data classes and get down into the weeds around to what extent do we feel that we're making progress on these ones already? Because I'm sure you recognize them by name, and some of them are pretty specific and small and more narrowly defined rather than some of them that are kind of larger category. And so we did a survey of those participants to try and figure out how many folks felt that the category was well defined to poorly defined or poorly defined. And we analyzed this, and I think the statistics are kind of interesting to look at. Obviously, for some of these smaller categories, and I don't know exactly why this only adds up to 50% here. It might have been some kind of a issue with, you know, people who didn't answer or something like that. But what I got out of this is that there are some smaller data elements that mostly people think are well defined. And there are some areas, like if you look at problems right here, 42% of the people who responded feel like problems are still not well defined. And some of the other areas, procedures, medications, assessment and plan, that's what AP, it's not accounts payable, assessment and plan. And if you add up lab results, lab tests and lab values / results, if you look at these two categories together, which are, you know, really the same thing, you'd be at 42% again. And so one of my concerns, or one of the things, you know, before we even push on into some of the data classes where mostly people agree that it's poorly defined, you know, some of the newer areas, you know, we're talking about in other quarters like data provenance and clinical notes, et cetera. that we do some work on improving where we stand against problems, procedures, medications, assessment and plan, and results. That's what I think that this quarter should be about at the implementation-a-thon. And one of the things that I wanted to get a little bit of preliminary information from you guys about, because I'd like to prioritize, like I laid out, if you look at it, problems, procedures, medications, assessment and plan, and results. Each of those, I'll call them tried and true categories of data where we have representation. That is, they're in C-CDs, they're used in almost every type of C-CDA document. You would think we would be further along on our definitions and our representation and our consistency, but we're still left struggling a little bit. So what I would like to do, and we'll open the mic, maybe go around, is have people say, what order do you think I should put these 5 slides in? From the one we should work on the most, let's put these at least in a prioritized order, and we'll do that to go around first. And then when you're all warmed up and starting to talk and think and contribute, we'll go back and we'll go to whichever one turns out to be top on the list, and we'll say, what is it about this data class that is still giving us trouble? That if we could, kind of air the dirty laundry or get the conversation out on the table around what's still a challenge and where do we still have interoperability gaps, what would it be? And we'll just put some notes in there, and I think that will help us put a little framework together that if we focus on those things, we could end up with some agreements and some changes or some clarifications that will help all of us over the coming 6 months or 4 months, however long it will be in between implementation-a-thons, to make some revisions and some changes and ultimately get to a place where those stats look better for these very critical 5 data class areas. Okay, everybody feeling warmed up? I'm going to go through the list. This is your big chance to move things around. Well, let's see. How are we going to do this with a big group? Does anybody want to volunteer? We'll do it like somebody make a straw man proposal to put them in a certain order, and then we'll take debate from other callers and participants to rearrange it into some other order. So you can volunteer, or I can call on somebody. Who wants to give it a shot?
I'll give you at least one. Assessment and plan, move it to the top. I think that's probably the top. Confusing.
Yep.
Rachel, I think results.
Move results up.
I would vote for results up. We actually recently just presented some information at the LOINC plenary, which is we did a large sample of how often were lab results in LOINC codes, and we had some interesting data there.
Yes.
Okay, between these two, what do you think? Should results be above assessment and plan or right below it?
Like being I think results are used more often in the C-CDA than assessment and plan, but I do think they both have very specific issues.
This is Michael Clifton.
Like at the ophthalmologist, which is better, 1 or 2? 1 or 2?
I agree with the results being first, but I also have to drop off now. Unfortunately, I'm 1:30, so we have another.
Do you want to make any other votes before you go? Encouraging any other these moving around?
Honestly, right now, I think both procedures and medications are things that I'm interested in. I think there's some good discussion for medications with relation to medications that we don't really have their perfect ways of modeling, like mixtures or things along those lines, complex meds. But I think that procedures are also up there in our mind in the sense of procedures that don't succeed necessarily or occur but don't have results that can be used and so therefore need to be done again. So I think we have definitely a good interest in both of medications and procedures. I think problems we've probably dropped down.
Enough, Michael, that you would suggest putting them in a different order?
I think so. I'd probably move medications up to third, at least for us. I might even move it above assessment and plan personally, but at least third, and then procedures probably after medications.
Okay. And maybe above assessment plan. All right, thanks very much. We'll see. I can't guarantee they'll stay here, but thanks for contributing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Good rest of your day. Right. Okay, super.
Thank you.
Okay, who else? Boy, I'm surprised at how this is turning out. I thought problems was going to rate higher in the list. Anybody voting for problems to be any higher up? Interesting.
I mean, this is my anecdotal experience. I think that problems aren't actually too bad from a lot of the data that we see. It's SNOMED or ICD-10. We get a lot of each, but.
Mm-hmm. I guess my thing is, if we ignore the fact that of the consistency around, is it a problem, a condition, a diagnosis? You know, what's the right way of recording stuff in the problem observation code, and then how many problem observations should one expect inside the Problem Concern Act?
Mm.
But maybe everybody consistently is just doing one for one, you know, even though the template is not clear. Maybe nobody is doing that, and by default, we've all kind of gotten to a consistent agreement that it is just a single problem observation inside. But who uses diagnosis? Who uses problem? Who uses condition? You know, the problem type. I'll leave it on the bottom here, but problem type consistency.
Did you mean to put that on the problem?
Right.
The problems?
Oh yeah, sorry, I did. Yep, I'm in the wrong spot. I'll just note that down here. The two things that I would like to get out of this part of the conversation is that, and how many problem observations per problem concern, and then I would say consistency on use of other templates. Like, is anybody using that problem priority template? Are people using the problem status template? That kind of stuff. Okay, back to order. Are we good on order? We've got them. Anybody still want any changes, or is this good to work?
Lisa, can you talk a little bit about assessment and plan and what questions might go in there? It is something that I heard someone else say, and George say that was kind of ill-defined. I'd say, what do we want to get out of the IAT?
What do we want to get out of the assessment and plan? So one thing I can say is one template or two. Do we definitely see a lot of inconsistency, because this is one of those areas where the spec says you can either have an assessment section and a plan section, or you can have an assessment and plan section. And how do we sort all that out? I think also assessment versus the new clinical notes. Just so that a lot of times, you know, the assessment section, when you use it on its own, it's narrative only. And so what goes in the assessment section versus what goes in clinical notes that hold these narrative, I don't know, assessments, that I would say that would be something to get cleared up. Rochelle, you voted for this one. What other things are you guys struggling with for this section?
It's not really our creation of it, because we're just following a standard, and we do two different sections there, but it's really the documents we're receiving. They're a mess. I can probably bring some examples if I can get releases from customers, but the ones we're receiving, it's really hard to take that data and understand what their intention is.
How are you defining an assessment? There's assessment scores you can do. There's physical assessments. Or are you just talking about an assessment and plan concept?
These are physical assessments that I'm seeing in the documents. So I'm not sure.
We have structures now for pain assessment. Any kind of assessment actually you want to do, you can put into a structure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a wide range of potential assessment types, and there just needs to be more clarity around them.
Okay. Okay, good. So that's kind of what's going on probably with that one. How about results? John, you voted on this one. Where should we go based on what you're seeing and the work you were referencing?
Yeah, we're still seeing a lot of variation in terms of the use of link codes versus other local codes for it. We're also seeing just variation around what gets put in the results section versus other sections for that, which is does your CT get put down as a procedure and you have some information there? Do you get the imaging note in a result for that? We're seeing some variation there. Still, values and units of measures and reference ranges end up being wide spread across what we're seeing across a lot of samples. But open up to others too.
I just looked at one this morning and I saw they're putting e-script refills in. It's a major system. I was shocked. It goes in results. I'm looking. I think I still might have it up to give an example. E-script messenger refill as in a result.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with John. A lot of missing and original code sets, non-standard code sets being used.
I found some work that I was just doing recently, a lot of variance on what code goes in the organizer .code. And I also had things where you have a panel, like, what is it called? Like, Linda, help me out. The HEDIS one that's the depression screening, QPHD or
PQH9, right, Rochelle?
Yeah, PQH9 as an example, where
does that go
there's
into an assessment?
Component pieces of this panel, and just a mess of sometimes recording the component pieces. Sometimes you get the total score is what you ultimately need, and sometimes you can't tell the way they're coding them. They just use the same panel code over and over and over again, so you can't tell which one is just an answer to one of the component parts versus which is the total score inside the organizer. So
the other thing I see with that PQH9, there's two codes. Maybe I have an example. And one of them, and then they give coded data as the result, which is fine. But the primary code they give is not the one that goes with the codified data answer.
Let's do just like how to do the question and the answer pair.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's about microbiology in general.
Are you talking about the culture and sensitivity stuff and
yes,
the different organisms?
Antibiotic and
yeah, for the sensitivity.
Yeah.
Might need some help on that. Who do you think is the right resource to really weigh in on how to do microbiologies? We never got a good, we were going to do an example in the examples task force, and I don't think we got around to doing that.
There was a lady who hasn't been coming lately, Andrea Pitkus, who is a PhD in lab. And we did some fire stuff together, and she really knows.
Is she going to be at the Fire Connect-a-thon?
I have no clue. She used to work for IMO, but I don't think she does anymore.
So I'll just put down that we might need to think about a resource to help with that aspect of it. I'm even thinking Ricky Merrick will be there, and she's really great with microbiologies, and so will Eric Haas. And actually Jean Duteau may be pretty helpful with this, so that we might be able to work on that. How about medications? We have about 15 minutes left, and I need to save like 5 minutes for prepping for January 9th. So let's talk about medications. What kind of things are we seeing here that represent variation and challenges for interoperability?
Well, I think before he left, Michael mentioned, I'm thinking he was talking about compounding medications. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say this is Rachel from Epic also, since Michael's gone, I'm taking over for him. So I think he did say potentially compound meds, but also mixtures. Just in general, meds that like aren't your typical med that we don't have a good way to define.
How about NDC versus RX norm? Is anybody still having coding issues? Is everything coded pretty much in RX norm now?
I think after the last EMR vendor had so much trouble, everybody figured that out.
But HEDIS measures.
Whole different issue there.
But HEDIS measures use NDC.
NDC, yep.
Has anybody talked to them about that? Because, they made the change with SNOMED. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we need to.
The answer is yes. It has been discussed, but I don't know where they're going.
Is anybody bothered by the vast range of rendering differences and never knowing what to expect? Like John, you did a paper for Jamia that showed how many different patterns that you can see in the wild.
Yep. No, the images out there actually just got published at the ANIA proceedings for it. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to render the same 3 medications from different AHRs. But I don't know how much of that we'll be able to solve, but it'd be maybe a question worth asking.
Like what fields should be presented to the humans?
And you've got free text SIG.
Free text SIG, good. And what about active? This is something I think Michael brings us up around, what did we call it? Medication status. When we brought back the clinical status templates for problem and for allergy, there was a long-standing thing that happened back when consolidated CDA was first made, where previously in IHE and in earlier HL7 work, that notion of that status template, the clinical status, had also been present for medications and was used to discern what's an active med and what isn't an active med. And that just got lost along the way. And so I think a little bit of discussion around medication status and how do you know what belongs on the list is a bit of a question.
Can you throw mood code in there too, Lisa?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's another real bugaboo, which is we end up with medications that people say that they've been taking for several years as an intentional status or mood code.
Mm-hmm. So, and it's around when is it INT versus EVN?
Yep.
Okay. And how about procedures? What are the bugaboos that we want to get out in the open discuss?
I think this is Rachel again from Epic, but I think one thing we ran into recently from trying to send is these procedures that happened and they either have a result or they just happened, but they're kind of inconclusive or they're marked unsuccessful for some reason. So we still want to be able to send them, but we also want to be able to somehow flag them that they shouldn't be like included for health maintenance. They shouldn't satisfy a health maintenance thing. So if you're essentially exchanging information to try to fill in the gaps and say this thing happened, it fulfills this care gap, you're fine. We want to be able to say, like, this happened, but it doesn't actually fulfill that thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I have a kind of a simple example. If you think this is a good, I can note it as an example. With babies, they have a hearing screening test, and there's actually a CMS measure associated with this. And they consider it different if you attempt to screen the baby's hearing, but the baby is crying and fussy or squirming around too much or something like that, and so you don't get a good reading. So technically you did it, but you didn't really do it. They don't want that to count as getting a checkbox, to be in the numerator that child's hearing was screened. So the fact that you tried, but it wasn't successful is a different thing. That baby's hearing needs to be rescreened. And so they have a way of recording. There's a procedure and it did happen, but there's a way of recording that it wasn't successful, and that is that granularity is available to be used in the quality measure. Does that sound like what is that a good example of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that's a good example.
Anything else? How about coding? Is this where we use CPT and HCPCS, or are these SNOMEDs? What are we doing for coding?
Most of the time I see SNOMEDs, and ideally we would have CPT too, because it's for quality measures. SNOMEDs are coming in, but they're not here quite yet in the translation.
Anything else? So are procedures still higher than problems in terms of representation and consistency? Maybe, maybe not.
One more thing on procedures is making sure they're attributed to who actually did it. If they're recording, a mastectomy.
Mm-hmm. In this case of when it's not a procedure to change the patient's health condition, but in fact it's really a test, is there any consistency with the approach that's taken to say we're going to record the test as both a procedure and a test with its result, or do we just only record it as a test with no result if it hasn't been finished, but basically if you do it, you record it as a result, observation template with no results yet, and you know, it has some other probably mood code as well. It happened, but I don't know. How does that go? Do people record the doing of the test in a procedure, and then include a result observation to a result organizer with a result observation to record the results from the test, or do they just record only the record only the final result, and then you would basically infer that the test was done? What would be like Epic? You were talking about this first bullet that we just added here. What's your practice when it is, like, let's say it's a colonoscopy? Are you going to put in a procedure and then also put in a result organizer for the colonoscopy with a result observation saying if it's normal or if there were polyps? How do you do the two different kinds of entries, or do you just do one?
Typically, we'll do the procedure section entry just for the test, and then we'll do the result entry with the results. But I think the organizer code for us is also that same procedure. But in the narrative, we try to not duplicate the information. So in the procedure section, it'll be like, if there's results, you can go to the results section and see like the actual components. But at least you'll have the name of the thing that happened. So we would have it in both places, but we do try to not not duplicate information where possible.
Linda, do you see that also as a pattern?
I'm sorry, I don't look for data light in that same sense, so I probably am missing it if it's both places.
John, any experience? Oh, Rob. Hi, Rob.
Hey, yeah, I think this is something you guys should actually talk about, because it seems to me that could be interpreted in lots of different ways, and it'd be great to get some consistency about something that is a procedure or what someone may decide to call a procedure. And, you know, I'm sitting here trying to think of one that really literally doesn't have a result. Nothing comes immediately to mind, but I'm sure there are some. And
well, if you have bypass surgery,
many of them.
If you had bypass surgery, would you expect to find a result organizer for that, or?
Well, that's a good question. That's my point. I mean, there is a report, right? You're obviously going to have a surgical report. It's going to say what changed, because you clearly impacted the patient. But anyway, I mean, I'm not here to say how to do it. I just know that I would suspect that this happens the vast majority of times, that there's when it's not a lab test. In a lab test, everybody kind of knows, okay, I got this link code, I'm going to stick it in the results section, I'm going to say this is a test that was done, and here's the result. But for anything that isn't a link coded item, and I think there are situations where that's true too. I also want to kind of go back once we're done with this and talk about, I heard someone talk about the fact that there was a screening thing that was called an assessment, and therefore it was going into the assessment section, and that's, I think, something that we need to talk about and get consistency around what sorts of things go in the assessment section. But I suspect that it's a pretty small number of things, and I would be concerned if things that based solely on the word assessment being in there. But anyway, I want to set that aside. This big
and Rob, you're bringing that up because you're thinking that they're results.
Well, I think I don't want to put a name on it necessarily that then means that it belongs only in one place. I don't know what the right answer is. I just think you need to be consistent. I don't know that there is a right answer. And so but this big issue of anytime you have something I keep wanting to say, and I'm trying to not say it, but every time that it's not a LOINC code, because I'm assuming that if it's a LOINC code, probably most people stick it in the results section. But anytime, because what we talk about in ECQMs is that for things that are done that are procedures like that aren't a LOINC test, aren't a lab test, they're told to use SNOMED to represent them. And then many of them have a report, like the one thing that I was kind of wondering, is this similar to that as an EKG, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that probably has a LOINC code, but it's a procedure.
Yeah.
Where does that go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that's the kind of stuff that we need to get to for sure. I'm going to take the last 3 minutes, unless, Rachel, do you want to weigh in on anything what Rob just said? Is that true that if it would be expressed using LOINC, that you'd only be really putting entries in the results section, and in those cases you don't have a procedure documented as well?
So we should always have the procedure with it. I don't know, maybe I just didn't communicate that very well. That we would have something in the procedure section. It's just we kind of link them, so we'd be like, hey, the results for this are in the results section, but here's the name of the procedure. Here's the procedure entry.
So you're saying that's true certainly for colonoscopies, but would it also, that wouldn't be true if it was a chem panel, right?
If it had a procedure associated with it, and I don't.
A phlebotomy draw. Anyway, we shouldn't talk, but this is what I think would be really helpful to kind of go through, to think about.
Yeah, I think if we had examples, that would be good. We could generate examples for these different things, like phlebotomy, as you say, or these different types without results. Maybe we should just look at examples.
Rachel, that is the perfect segue for the thing that I have to say last today, and that is that we need to get onto our job of planning for Connectathon. And that means we really need examples to be populated out there. I know you guys, everyone's really under the gun right now, getting busy right before the holidays and stuff. But over the coming 2 weeks, between now and when we get together again in January, what I'd really like to see is if people can pick out examples that help to demonstrate these kinds of issues that we're talking about, and also think about the other quarters, encounter summaries versus patient summaries. Pull some challenging examples that will form the basis of good conversation for getting to consistency and looking at things across different implementations, so that we go into next year. By January 9th, I would like to be able to pull up a list of all of the samples that I have received from people, and we'll be able to say we're in good shape or we're not in good shape for being able to have a productive conversation. So in order to track this, I would like to make sure that everybody has my email address, lnelson@max.md. Send your examples to me over the next 2 weeks. I am going to be processing things through the holidays. I'll be posting things up into the Dropbox and getting us organized. And if we wait until after January 9th, we won't have a productive time together. We only have 2 days. We're doing a different topic every quarter. We really need to be prepped and ready to go. So you send the samples to me, maybe send a little note what you think it's relevant for, etc. I'll do the posting, getting us organized, make sure that we're prepped for the conversation. And whoever sends me the most examples is going to get a prize. I don't know what the prize is yet, but I'm going to pick out something really good, and so we'll make a little competition so it can be fun. I'll give out gold stars for everybody that does send me examples, and whoever sends me the best collection of samples to help facilitate the conversation, you're going to get a prize when we get together in San Antonio. So take it as a challenge, make it fun. You'll be helping the whole thing be more productive if you can do that before January 9th, so that when we get together next time, that's what we'll review. Sorry for the late start, but thanks everybody. Have a great holiday if I don't talk to you again before then, and we'll catch up by email over the next couple of weeks as we build out our sample repository. Thanks very much.
Lisa, one question, Dave Hamill here. Is the GoToMeeting coordinates for today going to be used on the 9th? Because I'll want to send out.
It will not. I'm going to have to send
Okay.
out. I made that one as just an emergency stopgap for this afternoon. And so keep an eye on the listserv and the other channels where you've been getting information about this, Zulip, et cetera. I will post the January 9th GoToMeeting invite so that you'll have the right link for next time.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye.